Okay, good. Let's get into this real quick. Today's video is about, just so that you're aware, a very important particular item, which is essentially when your when your food stamp benefits are going to potentially be paid out, also known as, of course, SNAP benefits. Now, this is something that a lot of people get very emotional about. And I want to just bring the emotion level down a little bit because I'm going to explain to you specifically what the president has stated about what's going on and into the future. So, as a result of that, no emotion. We're just going to go ahead and describe. Sorry, I was eating popcorn. Specifically, what the president said, so that there's no confusion, no spirit fingers and jazz. It's just exactly what's going on with these wonderful, scary, horrible food stamps. Let's get right to it real quick. Here is the president talking from a beautiful plane.
About canned goods and non-perishables for trick-or-treaters. Is there a possibility, like you did with the military moving around funds, is there a possibility to do that?
Well, there always is, but all the Democrats have to do is say, let's go. And, they don't have to do anything. They don't have to agree. All they have to do is say, the government is open. And we only need 5 Democrats. But they've become a radical left party. They've become a very radical left party. And they've lost their minds. All they have to do is say, the government is open, and that's the end of it. And, largely, when you talk about SNAP, you're talking about largely Democrats. But I want to help everybody. I want to help Democrats and Republicans. But when you're talking about SNAP, if you look, it's largely Democrats. They're hurting their own people. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, so what do you need to know? Basically, here's the deal. The president recognizes that the majority of voters who are essentially receiving food stamps are Democrats. So right off the bat, we know that he knows he's not hurting his base, the group that definitively defines whether or not he gets to go ahead and have a good midterm season, where they do the voting for all the people that are coming up at the 2 years into his presidency. As a result of that, just to be very clear, the president has, from that statement, made it very clear that he expects the Democrats to bend a knee before he will go ahead and truly release the food stamps. Now, a lot of people have been reporting online that food stamps are to be paid and are to be dispersed because 2 judges have essentially gone in that direction. But as you know from my prior video, we went through the different legal types of writs and orders and preliminaries and finals and all these different things that judges can do. And of course, the president and his administration reserve the right to go ahead and, making it very simple, appeal those orders, appeal those decisions. Okay. And they have different words and phrases for them. So what you need to know is this: President Trump, from that, knows that he's not really hurting the majority of his voting population, the group that got him to become president of the United States the second time. He is injuring those people who basically mostly vote Democrat, which is true. If you look at the statistics, it's very, very true. Those who are traditionally on food stamps, who are impoverished on SSI, they are less about capitalism, less about the wonderful dream of trying to work really hard to earn and make a bunch of money to spend it on crap you don't really need. So the point is, you know what I mean? That is true. I understand where he's coming from with that situation. He also stated that he's the president. He wants to help everybody, right? But, in conjunction with that, he's fully aware of who is actually voting for him. Now, with that said, he did release a statement. I have it right here, specifically on Truth Social. This was on October 31st, 2025, which was essentially yesterday at 6:10 p.m. So we're talking basically like a day ago. No additional comments were found after that point that I could find, but they may pop up here and there. Let's just go through exactly what the comment was. Quote, and this is Donald Trump's Truth Social quote: "Our government lawyers do not think we have the legal authority to pay SNAP with certain monies we have available." Okay, so what he's saying here is his legal team believes, which I don't really agree with. But again, I make these videos for both sides. Some people definitively believe that Trump's side is correct legally, yet they're not attorneys. Some people on the left believe that they're absolutely correct. As an attorney who works with homeless and Social Security recipients, but specifically Social Security disability and Social Security supplemental security income, I can say emotionally, legally, factually, it's leaning really towards the Democrats on this one as to being the correct party as to legally how this should proceed. But again, he says, our government lawyers do not think we have the legal authority to pay SNAP with certain monies we have available. Okay. And what they're talking about is essentially those monies that were left over from 2024 and 2025 in a contingency fund, which are supposed to be used for like a crisis situation, which of course Trump's attorneys are saying that a closed government is not a crisis situation because it is a created one as opposed to something that is like a chaos of a hurricane wiping out blah 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 blah, an unknown scary thing that's not capable of being foreseen is what they believe would need to occur before the release of these funds. Okay. He then states, and now two courts have issued conflicting opinions on what we can and cannot do. Once again, have issued conflicting opinions on what we can and cannot do. They're not really conflicting. The two rulings were essentially to release the funds. And then basically one was about should you use these other funds over here to go ahead and make the entire thing whole because they've got about 5.25 billion. They need around 9-ish billion, right? So they have to go to another slushy fund to go ahead and get that slushy fund all ready to roll to go ahead and pay out. Whereas the other judge said, okay, well, we expect you to look into these funds and go ahead and begin the disbursement process. Now, a lot of you are wondering, why have you not received your food stamps today? And that's because the government is closed. And while the court did rule, two courts technically, that specifically the food stamps should be released from at least the partial payment with the contingency funds that are available. So, you get about 2/3 of a check. Unfortunately, there is a legal process to this, which will take some time. Although, of course, the ruling by these judges were very, very quick. Okay, so let's go to the next sentence he has. I do not want Americans to go hungry just because the radical Democrats refuse to do the right thing and reopen the government. So once again, if we look at this entire situation, okay, the Republicans are trying to pass a clean bill, right? And that's their entire backdrop defense to looking like they have the moral high ground, which is a good moral high ground. It's a very good moral high ground because our government is 38 trillion in debt. We can't really afford to spend more. We have to find ways to dial spending back. With that said, the Democrats want to make sure that funding goes to inner cities, rural areas, Indian nations, basically even foreign overseas-based spending. But the main thing is for medical subsidies or medical insurance subsidies for those who can't fully afford their medical insurance. So to be fair, some of that I tend to be a little bit middle type of guy with this stuff. I don't think it's a horrible thing to help fund health insurance for the poor by having the government subsidize a portion of it. I'm not totally against that. Now, obviously, super funding medical facilities, local clinics, which is where a lot of the illegal immigrants go ahead and utilize that medical treatment. There, it's a little bit dicey, but at the same time, as a counter argument, just to be fair, do we really not want to treat the immigrants that are in this country illegally? Because remember, they can get, all kinds of bacterial, fungal, viral infections that very easily could potentially spread to you. So while I totally disagree with what President Biden did, which was letting tens of millions of people into this country illegally, it was treasonous in the way that he did it. And it was purely for vote farming and other things. But, the main thing was the purest form of it was to get more votes in the future. I do believe now that they are here, I think we should, you know what I mean? Look, I get it. ICE is going to pick up many of them. Okay. I get it. But during that time in which they are here, it would be good not to have people literally passing on things that could medically harm Americans who are here because we just decided not to treat them. Or we restricted treatment on individuals, which is in direct violation of what the doctors actually go ahead and sign up for. So it's a tricky situation is what I'm getting at, okay? All right, so he's saying the Democrats refuse to do the right thing and reopen the government. So he's basically going to go ahead and legally try to withhold the funds for payment of food stamps until the Democrats bend a knee. This is very dangerous. And the reality is you have two parties completely in control of this situation. And the problem is, and I'm going to be very honest with you about where I stand with this. And I don't usually like to talk about exactly where I stand on this stuff, but I think Trump and Schumer are drunk on power. Okay. And I think, I don't disagree with Trump in that Schumer kind of represents the swamp existence, being in office for decades upon decades upon decades, not really ever fixing things at a larger level. and then just kind of funneling things to side programs that should have never gotten money to begin with. Yeah, there's a swamp in the government. Schumer is the king of that, right? And then, of course, MAGA, the king of that is President Trump. I guess my point to this whole thing is, if it were anybody other than Trump and Schumer's getting pushed because of AOC fears, would this happen? You know what I mean? Like, think about it for a moment. Let's say let's say you had Bernie Sanders, right? You had Bernie, and then, and remember, he's heavily controlled by billionaires. He is, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and then Trump obviously is one. And then on the other side, right? Let's say you had VP Vance. Do you think we would have the same outcome? I don't know. I feel like there would be more negotiations. At this point, both sides have basically dug their heels in, and the people who can't eat, who need food, are the ones that are getting punished. Let's go to the next sentence. Therefore, I have instructed our lawyers to ask the court to clarify how we can legally fund SNAP as soon as possible. So what he's saying there is, hey, I'm going to do the right thing as president and have my lawyers write up request letters and send it to the judge. And basically, on Monday, the judge will likely receive or read or interact with those letters. And then at that point, the judges will go ahead and, begin doing what they do. Now, the judges did give certain timelines that they had to release the funds by. And of course, opposing side to the ruling is allowed to say, okay, well, clarify this for me. How am I supposed to do this? And we would like additional time to go ahead and do it. So what it is it's buying days to not pay out the benefits, to go ahead and do a legal trial tactic to, as a result, make, basically the Democrats feel more pressure from those who are not getting their food stamps. Now, we all know at the end of the day, might be around the 5th, might be around the 10th, might be around the 15th, but somewhere in there, people are going to get their food stamps. It's how it's going to go. But every single day that Trump is able to stall legally, it makes the Democrats, right? It makes them in this weird position because they've got to go ahead and figure out how they want to tackle this thing. They've already sued him with over 25 states and DC. They're at this point where they know that their constituents, right? They're, mostly low income, people who need food stamps, et cetera, homeless. They know at this point that at the end of the day, just to be fair with this, those people are going to become really angry when they haven't eaten, or had to go and drive to, a shelter, or go do this, or go do that, or go do this, or go do that. And the thing is, the shelters are literally they're getting money from the government and the state to, at this point, just go and quite literally purchase food from grocery stores to distribute to basically the homeless and low income. Now, I'm going to let you in on a little secret as to what's going on right now. Most of the stores that would normally donate food to these low income facilities are not donating much food right now because they're holding on to it to be able to sell it to the homeless help facilities. That is because when they donate the food to the homeless help facilities, they get a legal write-off on their taxes. But that's not making them as much money as if they were to sell the food at full cost. Yeah. So that's what's going on. So, okay, let's go through this real quick. All right. So, therefore, I've instructed our lawyers to ask the court to clarify how we can legally fund SNAP as soon as possible. It is already delayed enough due to the Democrats keeping the government closed through the monthly payment date. And even if we get immediate guidance, which they're not going to get until like Monday or Tuesday or Thursday or Wednesday or whatever, it's going to happen at some point from these judges down the week. Even if we get immediate guidance, it will unfortunately be delayed while states get the money out. If we are given the appropriate legal direction by the court, it will be my honor to provide the funding, just like I did with military and law enforcement pay. So what's happening here is Trump is playing a very tricky game of chess. He's making the Democrats look like they are powerless / unable to work a deal / he's making the Democrats look like, they're not able to go ahead and make the food come together. And so the actual voters on the Democrat side and it's terrible. They're not going to have food when they need it. They're not going to be able to buy the things that they need. It's bad. They're going to have to literally go and find food somewhere else. And there's religious organizations, churches, stuff like that. There's basically military vehicles that are setting up pantries. So I guess what my point is to you with this whole situation, this is essentially the story of two power drunk men who, at the end of the day, are trying to see who will blink first, right? It's a game of chicken, and they're both driving high-speed vehicles directly at each other. And at the end of the day, one of them has to swerve. So that's what's going on with this situation. That's why we're in this situation to begin with. So he says, okay, the Democrats should quit this charade where they hurt people for their own political reasons and immediately reopen the government. That's his way of saying they should just drop all those other things and basically pass the clean slate. If you use SNAP benefits, right? So he's saying this, he's directing this now to the American people that use SNAP benefits. Call the Senate Democrats and tell them to reopen the government now. Here is crying Chuck Schumer's office number, 202-224-6542. Okay, so just to clarify, right? He is saying you should go and blame the Democrats for not having food stamps. And to be honest, it's at this point a 50-50. It's a 50-50. Both of these men need to come to the table and make a deal. And the interesting thing, I guess, from my perspective, is that Trump is using a delay tactic and Schumer is using a blame tactic. I think that the blame tactic is, obviously Trump is doing a little of that himself, but his has more complexity with the delay. The delay has problems to it. The more time delay occurs, the more Soros type of money can be infiltrated into groups that will go and riot, that will end up injuring middle-class workers who are the people who voted for Trump. So it's dangerous because the longer Trump plays the delay game, the more the potential of creating more martyrs from injured people, from basically paid rioters, could potentially occur. At the same time, the more time that goes on, the more people are going to get pissed that are poor and not eating with the Democrats for not just giving in to the Republicans. And I'll be honest, if you look at the super MAGA and the super woke, right? Because those are the two monikers for essentially, the two, that's like the two groups, right? I mean, you could call them the two groups, the two cults, whatever. Like those are the two factions, if you will. The people who are part of like the super woke, they believe at an extremely high level that essentially the way of the woke is the only way. And to be fair, the only way the LGBTQ plus community is going to have that much stretch of rights and freedoms and opportunities and potential is to go with the left. Because obviously the right, the Republican side, they don't want men going into women's bathrooms and stuff like that. They don't want men changing, that and then going into some competition and injuring women. They don't want that. And so to them in the LGBTQ plus community, along with the Muslim or Islam community, that is the way that they see their only way to have their existence flourish in America. Right. And that's for immigrants coming in, those of Islam, those of the LGBTQ plus community. Now, on the other side, you have the MAGA, right? And the MAGA comes from the perspective of, make our country essentially great again by investing into those who are able to go ahead and produce, those who are able to go ahead and achieve, those who are going to innovate new future industries. And, I get that makes sense because the way countries are built and they grow, the first thing that happens when a country is started, they're not super worried about the poor because they've got to super worry about the people who can go ahead and create industries. So they're going to cater to those who are going to make the country more money so that those people can be taxed more. Then the country realizes, we've got a lot of people who are disabled, elderly, basically those who are, injured, things like that, those who are impoverished, those who might have a low IQ and can't go ahead and do stuff. So then they say, okay, well, now we're going to take care of these individuals, right? The fragile class of Americans. The group that kind of gets left out of the boosted up and take care of them, it's the middle class. The middle class consistently pays for way too much. The middle class consistently has to unfortunately have less and less and less each year. So at the end of the day, the middle class just kind of got lost in that whole equation. Because, when countries start, it's all about pushing those who can innovate and make money. And then it gets to those who are the fragile class. And then I thought we at some point would get to making the middle class better, but it just doesn't seem to happen. And just to give you an idea, a lot of you are older. So an education at the doctorate level is something that's worth more, not in actual application, but in the cost of it, than your house. And that shouldn't be that way. The cost of an education should be significantly reduced from what it currently is. And I understand some people are going to pay a lot more for Yale. I'm not a big fan of Harvard. I'm not a big fan of Cornell. I'm the least of a fan of Cornell. I mean, Cornell to me is the lowest. But the point is, when it comes to, those types of Ivy League schools, at the end of the day, to be fair, right? If you're graduating from one of those, sure, you're going to pay a lot of money because you're going to ultimately be able to pay it off. The problem is a lot of other schools are very similar in price. And then that person lives in a state of repetition with payments where they never get out of it. And they're angry because it's a middle-class person like me who constantly has to pay for student loans and never really gets to take that next giant jump, that next chance to innovate, create a product, do this, do that. So as a result of that, we have to at some point reevaluate how we're going to treat the middle class, because retirement benefits, they fail completely if we don't start focusing on the middle class. And that's something that retired people don't like to hear because, they paid in. But what they don't usually realize is that they paid for the prior generation and all of their money that they paid in was already spent. So that's something that really is quite upsetting to a lot. Now, we've gone over the specific statements that are recent from President Trump related to SNAP benefits. You now understand exactly what's going on. And this video isn't so much about the legality or the functions of the judges. We did that in the last video. What this video needs to be about, which I'm about to go through, and I think it's really one of the more important things of this video, is what is going to happen to SNAP benefits in the future, not just this cutesy, when is it going to pay this month game, because they're going to pay at some point this month, but when is it going to pay this month game? It is what it is. But there are major changes now that have occurred as a result of the big, beautiful bill, where there are millions of people who aren't even going to be eligible for food stamps going into the next round. Now, before we go into that, please remember, I don't do Medicare stuff. I don't sign people up for Medicare. I'm not a Medicare broker or agent or any of that jazz. If you have Medicare questions, please remember to give Chapter a call. AskChapter.org/disability over here at 339-226-6287. Again, 339-226-6287. They can answer questions for you. We're going to be doing some videos specifically on Medicare fraud that's been happening in the industry. They're following the fraud. They're aware of the doctors that are getting arrested. They're aware of the back office staff that are getting arrested. If you have questions, give them a call. They can do a tune-up specifically on your Medicare. Now, with that said, the future, and please remember, like and subscribe. A lot of you guys don't hit that like button, and it makes me super sad. The future of this system, okay? One of the things that is essentially coming into effect like today, literally today, is the modification to work requirements for able-bodied adults without dependents. Because remember, there's a bunch of categories of able-bodied adults that receive food stamps. The main thing was that Trump did not want particular categories of individuals who are able-bodied to go ahead and, very simply put, I'm going to make it as simple as possible. Trump did not want, these individuals to receive food stamps because he wanted them to go get a job and support the economy. Now, this was enacted, this new rule, on July 4th of 2025. It was phased in with applications, recertifications, with full effects by January 1st, 2026. However, some states have implemented it as of today, November 1st, 2025. So what happens is this. There's about 2.4 million people from 2025 to 2034, which is about 800,000 able-bodied adults without dependents that are basically under 64, who are essentially, it's about 300,000 adults with older children, or There's different groupings, but these individuals are no longer going to be able to receive a large portion of their food stamps or any food stamps at all. And some of you will be saying, hey, what the hell? Why can't they receive food stamps? Well, the thing is this. If they are able-bodied and they do have children above a certain age, the expectation is that basically Trump expects them to go and get a job. Now, some of you have seen the videos, and I know some of you stand on the side that the government should be able to give food to every American. And some of you believe, basically that America should give food to every immigrant, every non-citizen, every person who is here illegally as well. That food should be a right of basically the United States. I have personally wrestled with this immensely. So here's my thoughts on it, okay? And I'm just going to be very fair with you. I'm going to tell you where I'm at, and then, of course, you can tell me where you're at with it as well. And I do like to read the comments on this stuff because you give me kind of an understanding, and I think of things that I haven't thought about before through the ideas you have. Here's my stance on the situation, okay? Humans need food to be able to eat. Our farmers are paid by the government to restrict how much food they actually produce. They're subsidized. At the end of the day, we could, in theory, produce so much food in this country that we could feed most of the human race. We could set up larger farms, do more farmland. We could turn America back into a ranch/farm country. Some of you will say, why are you talking about this? Well, I grew up on a farm. I grew up on a farm that was on the top of and side of Marble Mountain, okay, which is really more like a hill, but in New Jersey, mountains aren't that big. And so the reality of this thing is that I know with farming, if we prioritized Aggie-based training, proper, how to use Kubotas, how to use, anything, could be John Deere's, could be chases, it could be cases, could be anything, right? If we taught people how to use the machinery and gave them practical application learning, we could put a lot of people back to work when it comes to farming. However, the future of farming, and this is where, Bill Gates is ahead of a lot of people that realize what he's doing, is that they have now robot-based tractors, robot-based processing facilities, where literally almost every aspect from the seed growing out of the ground and the process to create the ground, in which case it needs to be for the seed to be planted, water, whatever, they have machinery for almost every single aspect of production, to yield, to actual, pulling and placing and cleaning, and then basically packaging and shipping. They have machines for a lot of this stuff now. And that is why you are seeing somebody like Bill Gates buying up most of the farmland that he can, most of the ranches that he can, because he knows at the end of the day that food is going to be a commodity that if you control it, you can control how people exist, because a starving person is in duress and they're going to go ahead and do whatever you tell them to do. So as a result of that, what I think you need to understand is that we could make in America food a legal right. We could do that. However, to be fair, am I getting crickets? Do we have some crickets in here? No, that's not crickets. There they are. There's my little buddies. There we go. So here's the deal. Okay, real quick. My point with this whole situation is that I think if we really get down to the bottom of this, we are seeing kind of like a James Bond fighting like the ultimate evil scenario. And we're getting to see how if the government is able to control something, they have the ability to cut that thing off. And some of you will say, well, no, the courts will protect us. Yeah, well, this thing would have to go all the way to the Supreme Court, and that's going to take a while. You know what I mean? The judicial system is not a perfect sphere of everything that should be going on and actually happening. So my point to you is, some of you are waiting for your food stamps check, and you don't realize that November 1st, and you might be in one of those states, and I guess I'll do a video specifically on the states, but the point that, I just need you to understand is that some of you who are part of that able-bodied category are not going to receive food stamps anyways. And that sucks. And it is what it is. My point with this, and there's other things too, basically availability of the standard utility allowances, the SUAs, when it comes to, receipt of energy assistance. Then there's the restrictions on internet expenses, basically lowers benefits by about $10 monthly for about 65% of the households. There's all these things that are happening with food stamps. So if you're having the expectation at the end of the day that your food stamps are going to be coming, well, they're going to be farther down the line in November. And if you have the expectation that your food stamps are going to be the same amount, just realize some people are going to be getting a reduced food stamp and some people are going to be getting no food stamp at all. So SNAP benefits are going through a lot of changes as a result of all this. Now, I know that some of you are coming from the perspective that at the end of the day, you feel that Trump is not being fair. So I would like to point out why the MAGA party is so successful, because a lot of people on the left don't really understand how people could be part of the MAGA party. Let me explain. When you have a lot of people who have cultures in America and their cultures are being dragged through the mud, like Christians, right? Their culture is being dragged through the mud. When that happens, the Christians who have been in America for a very, very long time, I mean, before America was even here, the Christians who've been in America look at this and say, who did this to us, right? Who is oppressing us? And so what's happening is you have the old guard being oppressed by the new guard. And the new guard would be the Democrats, which tend to be the innovators. And the old guard, which tend to be kind of like the hold fast, we are the old school bankers, that is the Christians. Now, as you know, the Christians are, about, having a marriage and having kids and having a family unit. And it's just a more old school style of living. And then the Democrats come in, right, with their style of living, which is more along the lines of, you don't have to have kids. You don't have to keep your same gender. You can change your name whenever you want. You can get tattoos all over. You can get piercings all over. You can do whatever you want. It's a much more free, have fun kind of existence. Now, with that said, however, on the left, and somebody who represents people for disability benefits all day, you do tend to see significantly more or larger amounts and deeper amounts, severity levels of the deepness of the severity of the anxiety, depression, panic attacks, PTSD, bipolar personality disorder. That tends to be a lot higher on the left. And I've thought about this a lot. And what I've concluded about it is that the Republican side as a group tends to be more about easily definable values that are like bright line rules. You know what I mean? And they don't really change much. On the left, there's a lot of new, we're changing, we're constantly modifying. You have to join the club. If you're not part of the club, then you have a problem. You must be part of this. You must agree with this. You must be in this thing. And the thing keeps changing. And I believe personally, from talking with a lot of claimants of mine, that a lot of the anxiety and the depression, the panic attacks comes from constantly feeling this shift of where the party is going. Because if you are not in the party, then you're an enemy of the party. And there's some of that on the Republican side as well. Absolutely. Because remember, the Republican Party is split into like three groups. So you've got like basically the middle people, which are basically the people who used to vote Democrat that are like Clinton Democrats. Then you have the MAGA movement, and then you have the far right, which is like the Republicans in name only, the rhinos and stuff like that. The classic Republicans, the waspies, right? So as a result of all this, I guess what my point to you is, when it comes to this situation, there is no definitive date, but we know that the court is likely going to respond within the next 2 to 3 days with how they're supposed to do this. And they'll also slap Trump's team on the wrist. But remember, Trump's administration has a lot of defenses because it is the government. Okay, they can't slap the wrist too hard. So as a result, probably around Wednesday, the courts will make another demand on Trump. And then Trump will say, hey, Democrats, just reopen the government, give us what we want. Democrats will say, no. Now, we both know that the Democrats arguing that the Republicans have shut down their ability to vote on reopening the government. We know that that is de facto a lie. Okay, even MSNBC, even ABC have picked up on that and say, and they're saying at this point, look, it's unrealistic. There's been so many opportunities to vote to reopen the government. It's not a definitive Democrats are voting this way, Republicans are voting that way. There are some people that are splitting and going with each side. So it's just one of those things where at the end of the day, no, the Republicans have not limited the ability to vote on this particular topic. Have they limited the scope of the things that they vote on? Somewhat. The Democrats have offered theirs, the Republicans have offered theirs. Both have gone up and both have done heavy party lining. My reaction overall to this entire situation is this. I want to do a little study with you, a real quick thing, because I think it will help you understand, it will help your brain feel what's going on a little bit better. I'm going to read what Trump said on his Truth Social tweet really fast. And then I'm going to read it really slow. And after that, your brain is going to basically feel very differently about what you're hearing. And this is because your brain has had time to digest exactly the words you're hearing after learning from all the things we've just covered. So I want to do this just as an experiment where I read to you exactly what Trump said. You hear it, and then you kind of let it sink in and go from there. First time I'll read it, it'll be quickly. Second time I'll read it, it'll be very, very slow. And this is a really good way to study, because reading something the first time, let your brain get used to what words are there, and then reading it slowly thereafter is a great way to allow your brain to start to process things and get ahead of the ball and feel like it's part of this process. Here we go. Trump's quote: "Our government lawyers do not think we have the legal authority to pay SNAP with certain monies we have available, and now two courts have issued conflicting opinions on what we can and cannot do. I do not want Americans to go hungry just because the radical Democrats refuse to do the right thing and reopen the government. Therefore, I have instructed our lawyers to ask the court to clarify how we can legally fund SNAP as soon as possible. It is already delayed enough due to the Democrats keeping the government closed through the monthly payment date, and even if we get immediate guidance, it will unfortunately be delayed while states get the money out. If we are given the opportunity, the appropriate legal direction by the court, it will be my honor to provide the funding, just like I did with military and law enforcement pay. The Democrats should quit this charade where they hurt people for their own political reasons and immediately reopen the government. If you use SNAP benefits, call the Senate Democrats and tell them to reopen the government now. Here's crying Chuck Schumer's office number, 202-224-6542. And that was me reading it quickly. Your brain is trying to figure out everything that was said there. Now let me read it to you slowly. These are the exact words from Trump's most recent comment on Truth Social, literally a day ago, October 31st, 2025, 6:10 p.m., about this process. Here we go. Now I'm going to read it slowly. "Our government lawyers do not think we have the legal authority to pay SNAP with certain monies we have available. And now two courts have issued conflicting opinions on what we can and cannot do. I do not want Americans to go hungry just because the radical Democrats refuse to do the right thing and reopen the government. Therefore, I've instructed our lawyers to ask the court to clarify how we can legally fund SNAP as soon as possible. It is already delayed enough due to the Democrats keeping the government closed through the monthly payment date. And even if we get immediate guidance, it will unfortunately be delayed while states get the money out. If we are given the appropriate legal direction by the court, it will be my honor to provide the funding, just like I did with military and law enforcement pay. The Democrats should quit this charade where they hurt people for their own political reasons and immediately reopen the government. If you use SNAP benefits, call the Senate Democrats, tell them to reopen the government. Now, here's crying Chuck Schumer's office number, 202-224-6542. What I noticed when I read it quickly thereafter for my own existence, what I noticed was that basically at the end of the day, there are condition precedent situations. There are conditions that must be made in the statements that he is giving for him to do something. Let me read them to you. Okay, so when you read through a document and you hear, okay, and I'm going to read you the exact thing here. It will unfortunately be delayed while states get the money out. Okay, so that was the sentence that came after, or the little part of the sentence that came after this piece. If we get immediate guidance, a condition that must be met, it will unfortunately be delayed while states get the money out. He has a condition that must be met before he makes actionable, changes to paying out the funds. If we are given the appropriate legal direction by the court, it will be my honor to provide the funding. So what he's done here is he's figured out on a piece of paper, I'm sure, exactly what elemental requirements he wants to be made before he takes action. My legal team, element 1, will reach out to the court to go ahead and figure out what the proper action should be. Element 2, the court will have to give guidance on exactly what they want us to do. Number 3, if his attorneys agree with that and they don't want to appeal the order, then he will go ahead and pay out the funds because it would be his honor. But he is upset about the Democrats who could have just opened the government and paid these benefits out to begin with. Hence the sentence, the Democrats should quit this charade where they hurt people for their own political reasons and immediately reopen the government. Here's my take on this whole thing. 2 men completely drunk on power that are fighting for control of who will bend a knee and blink first. It's weird. And I think that at the end of the day, Chuck Schumer is frankly in a spot that he created. He knew, and he even published statements on the news channels about why he did not want to be in this position. He got pressure from the Democratic Party. They started to do collections, gatherings, a little bit of riots. And as a result of that, what happened is, unfortunately, at this point, he's now stuck in this position where if he doesn't want what the Democratic Party pushes, he'll be replaced. Here's my feeling about this. Chuck Schumer should do its best for his voters. That's who put him in office. So what do you guys think? What would be the best thing for Chuck Schumer to do for his voters? What would be the best thing for Trump to do for his voters? Well, Trump's voters are mostly middle class, and then it's a mixed grouping of those who are wealthy. Right? Okay. All right. So that at the end of the day, whether food stamps get, essentially paid out or not, most of Trump's voters don't really care. They don't give a bleep. On the Democrat side, you have Schumer. Many of his voters come from the low income or poverty or homeless background. So as a result, Schumer's got to decide, well, does he get his people fed? Does he hold on a bit longer so that basically funding of, the government to help pay for subsidized health insurance for those who can't afford it, then also funding clinics in rural areas with doctors that go to them, and basically funding clinics and emergency rooms to go ahead and treat all kinds of people, including illegal immigrants. The point that this comes down to is Chuck Schumer's in a spot. If he gives in to Trump, he will immediately be replaced by somebody else the moment a vote occurs. Immediately. And it will probably be AOC. And to be fair with you, the Democratic Party is split. You have the more traditional Democrats, kind of like your Clinton-era Democrats that are now farther left because that's where the party went. But they're not full woke yet. Then you have the woke Democrats. The woke Democrats are really, really far left. And so that group is now becoming the mainstay of the Democratic Party. What will happen? I don't know. But I think that Chuck Schumer does not necessarily represent what the Democratic Party wants anymore. And I think that Chuck Schumer is trying to grasp onto the final days of his existence. And, it's like with anything. It's like James Bond doing one more film that shouldn't have really been done because he just kind of aged out of that position and he wasn't able to do all the fighting and the thising and the thating that normally would come from a person at that James Bondy secret agent age. That's kind of where Chuck Schumer's at. He's been in a long time. He's not really the voice of what the left really is. And let's call it like it is. AOC, right? Mamdani, that's the future of the Democratic Party. And, they know that they can't get the Clinton-style Democrats on board. They know that. And they know that essentially a lot of the females, the white females that were getting jobs as a result of DEI and stuff like that, because those were the real beneficiaries of that. That was the highest level beneficiary from that program. Those individuals, once they stop getting the benefit of that, are probably going to slide more to the right. And then, of course, you have to fill those slots with new people, which, of course, immigrants, Muslim Americans, Islam, more LGBTQ plus people, but there's not enough LGBTQ plus people for the filling of those slots. So I think what's really difficult about this is that Schumer is just trying to do what the party wants him to do. And if he does whatever's right for the American people that are impoverished, it will ultimately be used to remove him. And he doesn't want to go out that way. He wants to go out as a hero. And the left may destroy his name before he has the opportunity to basically get out of the system. And that's what's on his mind, I believe. All right. Anyways, I will catch you all a little bit later. I have another video where we're going to be basically going over what Trump's master plan for food stamps is going to be. But most importantly, when it comes to what's going to happen with using ICE and also things like Social Security's OIG and the CDI units to go ahead and investigate people who are receiving food stamps while on disability benefits or some other type of benefits, and how they're going to go ahead and investigate those people in the future. All right. Thank you so much, Rob White, for the 99-cent donation. Let me put a little heart there. That's awesome. Very, very cool. That's very, very cool. Okay. So I will catch you all at the next video in about 5 to 10 minutes. Attorney Walter Hnot. And then remember, at the next video after that, so the third video, I'll answer questions for free. Attorney Walter Hnot, Disability Resolution PA. Remember to go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. If you get a chance, go to Google, type in Disability Resolution, throw some stars up there. We always appreciate that. And then if you want a private session of 30 minutes or an hour, mini contract is below. I'll catch you a little bit later, and I will see you at the next one in about 5 to 10 minutes. Thank you so much. Attorney Walter Hnot. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.